This evening, we will conclude our study of the life of Samson. We've been taking a look over really several weeks now, interrupted for other teachings and interrupted for communion. So when I've taught in the past couple of months, most of the time it's been on this. And Samson is just one of those people, one of these great people in the Bible, one of these great heroes in the Bible that most people have heard of, and yet few people really understand his life or what he was all about. And that's why we've devoted so much time to his life, to understand Samson, because he is misunderstood, to understand the source of his strength, to understand the vows, the commitments he's made, and how all of those are so central to who he was and what he accomplished. But Samson's one of those people that's recognized in Hebrews 11, where what I like to call the Hall of Fame of believers are named. All of these wonderful believers from the Old Testament that did incredible, important, mighty works, and they did them all by believing. Samson's conclusion of his story, his ending, is both tragic and epic. And that makes Samson both an epic and tragic hero. Now, I'm using those terms of tragic and epic hero the way that they're used in literature. And in classical Greek literature, those are both very commonly used figures in literature, and they are very different. And although classic Greek literature was written hundreds of years after the life of Samson, I think that it will help you to understand Samson a bit more if I explain to you what those differences between a tragic and an epic hero in Greek literature was. An epic hero is viewed as legendary due to their uncommon birth and seemingly superhuman capabilities and heroic deeds. Although they battle against overwhelming odds, they are sure to achieve victory. A tragic hero possesses a tragic or fatal flaw. He's one who makes often an error in judgment that ultimately leads to his downfall. And many times that error in judgment is related to a flaw in character as well. A tragic hero, in contrast to an epic hero, often doesn't have a good outcome, a profitable conclusion. Instead, they experience a tragic downfall that they're most likely never going to escape from. So you've got these different figures in literature, these mythological often figures in Greek literature that are categorized as tragic or epic heroes. Everything goes good for the epic, not much goes good for the tragic because of that tragic flaw. So far, in our study of Samson, we've seen Samson, the epic hero. We've seen the amazing circumstances of his birth, his noble birth. We see that he is one of a handful of people whose birth was announced by an angel. That he's one of the few people also who was born to a mother that was barren for most of her childbearing years. We see that Samson is one of only a couple of people who was born with the Spirit of God on him. So he has this extraordinary birth, and then he does these incredible deeds. And I won't enumerate all of them, but the most famous one, is he at one time kills 1,000 of the enemy, the Philistines, with the jawbone of an ass. Nothing more in his hand, no sword, no other people helping him, just him against 1,000 of the Philistines. So Samson does all these incredible deeds. But now we come to that point where sadly we find his downfall that he's also as famous for. And you can turn to Judges 16. And we'll begin in verse 1. Then when Samson to Gaza, remember that place, and I mentioned it before. This is the same Gaza that exists today and has been a hot spot of trouble so often in history. He came to Gaza and saw there a harlot and went in unto her. And it was told the Gazites, saying, Samson is come hither. Samson's here. And they compassed him in and laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city, and were quiet all the night, saying, in the morning, when it is day, we shall kill him. So, unlike the other events we've seen in Samson's life in the past, it doesn't say that he did this with God's leading. Sometimes some of the things he did with God's leading may have perplexed people, that it would be God, but it clearly states that the Spirit of God moved him to do this. But in this case, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that the Spirit of God moved him to do this. There's no indication that he went in there to this harlot for any other reason than he wanted to do that. And as he's there, the enemy, Gaza, is one of the main cities of the Philistines. And they know he's there, and they are just waiting for morning. They've got the place surrounded, and they're ready to jump on him and kill him the minute he comes out. But, verse 3, and Samson lay till midnight. He didn't stay there all night. And arose at midnight, and took the doors of the gate of the city, and 2 posts, and went away with them, bar and all, and put them upon his shoulders, and carried them to the top of a hill that is before Hebron. Now, it says he carried off the gate of the city. This is not like the gate to your backyard. This is not like a gate you might have seen in some field, in some farm, on some farm. This gate, the gate to the city, was quite an impressive structure. Based on archaeological findings of other gates, other cities, we can have some idea of what it would have been like. It's likely that this gate was around 60 feet tall. Wow. That it was made of massive stone blocks, probably paired together. It was possibly anywhere from 1.5 to 3.5 foot thick. And it was at a weight, estimates range anywhere from 0.5 ton to 4 tons in weight. So he picked this, we'll just call it 0.5 ton. What is that? How much is a ton? 2,000 pounds? So 1,000 pounds at the least gate, 60 feet big, tall, and he puts it on his shoulders and he carries it to a place that is 0.5 mile away. Quite the feat, right? Mm-hmm. And here you have Samson in a situation where this is not something God told him to do, and yet God is still with him. Mm-hmm. God doesn't let the enemy get him. God doesn't let him be caught. God helps him get out of there in this incredible way. And in doing so, and in walking off with the gate of the city, that left the city of Gaza open to anybody that wanted to just come in. They were vulnerable to all of the enemy that could come in at any time, since they didn't have a gate to their city walls. Look at chapter 16, verse 4 now. And it came to pass afterward, after this happens, that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. And boy, everybody's heard of Delilah that's heard of Samson. You know, one thing that I didn't mention, we left off in chapter 15 with it saying that Samson judged Israel for 20 years. And most of the time of that 20 years takes place from the end of chapter 15 to this point. Everything that we read about Samson, it's obvious, happened pretty quickly once he began his ministry, his leadership, his judging. Him getting married, killing the 1,000 men, all of that are events that are described as happening sort of one right after the other with maybe a year or so in between them. So there's a long time that he's been around and a long time that he's done the job of leading Israel, of helping them. But now this day comes where Samson is just acting strictly on his own desires. And he meets this woman named Delilah. And it says that he loved her. He loved her. It never said that he loved the woman that he married. He just married her as an occasion against the enemy to pick a fight. It certainly doesn't say that he loved this harlot, but he did love Delilah. Verse 5. And the lords of the Philistines came up upon her and said unto her, Entice him, and see where his great strength lieth, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him. And we will give thee every one of us 1,100 pieces of silver. Now, I don't know how many lords of the city there were, but each one of them were going to give her 1,100 pieces of silver. So it's quite a bribe that they're laying on her. And what they want to know is what's the secret to Samson's strength? What's the secret to his strength? Verse 7. And Samson, verse 6. And Delilah said to Samson, Tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lieth, and wherein thou mightest be bound to afflict thee. Samson, tell me, how is it that you're so strong? How can you do these incredible things that you've done? And how is it that somebody could capture you and tie you up? Now, you got to stop and think. I don't care how pretty this girl was. I don't care what he felt. Like, why would he ever answer? Why would he ever answer? And Samson is just such a character that he just, for the longest time, doesn't even take it seriously. To him, this is just a game. This is just a kind of a joke. But watch how she plays him. And Samson, verse 7, said unto her, If they bind me, if they tie me up with 7 green withs, 7 fresh ropes that were never dried, then shall I be weak and be as another man. Was that where the source of his strength was? No, nothing at all. Does he know that this? Yeah. Of course he does. But she's asking, and he just, rather than saying, none of your business, and why would you ask me a question like that? He just said, well, if they tie me up with some ropes, well, then I'll be as weak as anybody else. Verse 8. Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 green withs, which had not been dried, and she bound him with them. There she does it. Now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber. These guys are right in the bedroom, hiding under the bed, hiding in the closets. And the minute she does this, they jump out. And she said unto him, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he brake the withs, has a thread of tow, is broken when it touches the fire, so his strength was not known. It's as if, somebody lit a fire to these things and they just kind of broke as easy as you could break a string that was most of the way burnt through. And Delilah said unto Samson, Behold, thou hast mocked me and told me lies. Now tell me, I pray thee, wherein thou mightest be bound. Again, You would think that he would have said, "What did you do to me? Get out of here. You're lucky I don't kill you." But instead, she somehow turns this around on him, saying, "You mocked me. You just made fun of me by telling me this stuff, and you lied to me." And what's the real secret? And he said unto her, If thou bind me with new ropes that never were occupied, then shall I be weak and as another man. Kind of like what the last one was. It's not real original here, but again, he just tells her some nonsense. And what do you think's going to happen? She's going to do it again. And Delilah therefore took new ropes and bound him therewith and said unto him, "The Philistines be upon thee, Samson." And there were liars in wait, waiting in the chamber, and he brake them from off his arms like a thread. Pretty much the same scenario, and yet here's Samson still just playing along, not taking any of this as anything serious at all. Verse 13, and Delilah said unto Samson, "Hitherto thou hast mocked me and told me lies." You're just a terrible person, Samson. It's terrible how you just keep on mocking me and making fun of this and not taking it serious and telling me these lies. "Tell me wherein thou mightest be bound." And he said unto her, "If thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with the web." And she fastened it with the pin. So this is like a weaver's thing. And the pin is like something involved in like weaving tapestries. And she fastened it with the pin and said unto him, "The Philistines be upon thee, Samson." And he awaked out of his sleep and went away with the pin of the beam and with the web. So he goes basically, she uses like a weaver's kind of loom type of thing and like weaves his hair into that, and he just leaves dragging that right behind him. Verse 15. And she said unto him, "How canst thou say I love thee, when thine heart is not with me? Thou hast mocked me these 3 times, and hast not told me wherein thy great strength lieth." You know, it's amazing not only that he plays along, but amazing that she's got the nerve to do this. That here she is with a guy that she knows is strong enough to kill 1,000 men with the jawbone of an ass, and yet she continues to do this and manipulate him. And boy, she just does this over and over again to the point where she wears him down. It says in verse 16, "And it came to pass when she pressed him daily with her words." This isn't just one time. Day after day, she just keeps this up, just nagging him, just harassing him and manipulating him, and urged him so that his soul was vexed unto death. I love that phrase. His soul was vexed unto death, troubled unto death. She just literally like nagged him to death. That's what she did. Verse 17, that he told her all his heart, and said unto her, "There hath not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite from God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak, and be like any other man." Well, now he's done it, because this isn't just some story that he's made up here. This is the secret to his strength. Not in the long hair. Samson wasn't strong because his hair was long. If so, then everybody that had long hair ought to be able to do what Samson does. Yeah, looking at you, Jerry. But what's involved in it is Samson, from the time of his birth, was a Nazarite. A Nazarite was a religious vow. And it was a vow to serve God all the days, in his case, all the days of his life. Not every Nazarite was one for life. But that was what Samson was called to do. To serve God as a judge, to deliver Israel out of the Philistines, to begin to do that job. But there were certain things that went along with being a Nazarite. Certain external signs of being a Nazarite. things that he was to do. He was to never have strong drink. In fact, even his mother could not have strong drink while she was carrying him in the womb, or probably as long as she was nursing him, because he could never have any way that he had strong drink. There are a couple of different things, but most importantly to this record is that he could not have his hair cut. He could not cut his hair so long as he had that vow. And when he tells her this, it isn't in the cutting of the hair, but it is in the betrayal of that vow. It is in that vow being broken once that happens that takes his strength from him, because that strength wasn't his own strength. It was the strength of the Spirit of God within him. You know, Samson made mistakes. He should have never, everything we've read in this record of his carrying on with one woman at the other, and taking up with Delilah, none of that was anything he should have ever done. But that's not what is his downfall. That's not his real tragic flaw. Oh yeah, you can say that, you know, women were involved in it, but it was allowing himself to be manipulated, allowing himself to be so influenced by Delilah that he ever tells her this. A woman can have great power over a man, especially one that loves her. And that goes back to the garden. Adam was not deceived, it says, only Eve. Adam just went along because he loved Eve. Proverbs warns about the effect that a woman that's not a righteous woman, not a virtuous woman, can have on some man. Now that doesn't take the responsibility off of the man, but boy, it does show that a woman has great power for good or for evil. She can, a good woman in the life of a man can raise him up to heights that he's never been at before and would have never achieved without her. And one that's not can bring him down to his knees and to total ruin. And that's the case with Samson. Verse 18. And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she knows he's telling her the truth now. She sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, "Come up this once, for he hath showed me all his heart." This time I know he's telling me the truth. Then the lords of the Philistines came up upon her and brought money in their hand. And she made him sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. And she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. Then she said, verse 20, "The Philistines be upon thee, Samson." And he awoke out of his sleep and said, "I will go out as at other times before, and shake myself." And he wist not that the Lord was departed from him. He didn't realize what had happened. He didn't realize that in breaking that vow, that now he had lost that Spirit of God. He no longer had that source of great strength and that source of great power. And so in verse 21, we see this downfall. We see the consequences of his breaking that vow. But the Philistines took him and put out his eyes. They blinded him. They literally took his eyes out. And brought him down to Gaza. Gaza, where'd you hear that one before? Yeah, the gates. So he's back to the same place. They bring him to Gaza. And Gaza was, again, one of their major cities. And Gaza was the place where the temple to their god, Dagon, existed. Dagon, who was the god of the harvest. And if you remember back, those of you that heard that teaching a few weeks ago, when Samson tied the tails of the foxes together with a torch in between them and set them in the field and wiped out the harvest, that was a total offense to that god of the harvest. So here they are now. They bring him to this city of Gaza the city where he had left them vulnerable by taking the gates, the city where they had the temple to their great God that he had offended. And this is where they will have their way with him and bring him to death. And they brought him there and bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind in the prison house. Howbeit, the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaven. And there's more to that than just the fact that his hair is growing. It also indicates that Samson is repentant, that Samson's heart is also turning back to God. Verse 23. Then the lords of the Philistines gathered them together for to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon their God, and to rejoice. For they said, Our God hath delivered Samson our enemy into our hand. There they are having this great festival, this great sacrifice. And they've got Samson prisoner there, rejoicing in their victory over him. Verse 24. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, Our God hath delivered into our hands our enemy, and the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. I'd say so. And it came to pass when their hearts were merry, after they had enough to drink, that they said, Call for Samson, bring him in here, that he may make us sport. And they called for Samson out of the prison house, and he made them sport, and they set him between the pillars. And he didn't make them sport in the manner of like he was doing a basketball display for them or some other sport like that. Sport comes from a Hebrew word sahak, which is defined as to sport, to play, to make sport, toy with, make a toy of. A noteworthy occurrence of the word, you don't have to turn there, I'll just read this to you, that informs one of the significant meanings of the word is found in Genesis 26, verses 7 to 9, where it talks about Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, looking out his window, and he saw Isaac with Rebekah, his wife. Now, Abimelech would have made a move on Isaac's wife Rebekah, but he was afraid to do that because he didn't want to end up going up against Isaac's God. And Isaac had told him, because Isaac was afraid of him, Isaac was afraid that that king would kill him over his desire to have her. He told him that Isaac was his sister. So when the king sees him sporting with Rebekah his wife, he called Isaac and said, Behold, of a surety she is thy wife, and how saidest thou, she is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, Because I said, lest I die for her. Why did you lie? Why did you say it was your sister? Why didn't you tell me it was your wife? Well, I was afraid you'd kill me because you wanted her. Well, he knew it was not his sister when he saw them sporting. And it's obvious that that sport wasn't badminton. It's used in a similar way in Genesis 19:17, where it's describing the record of Joseph when he's servant in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar's wife tries to force herself on Joseph, and when he doesn't go along with it, she says to her husband it was the other way around. He came in here and he tried to assault me, molest me. It says in verse 17, And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou brought unto us came in unto mock me. It's the same word as sport. Again, mock in this sense isn't like he was making fun of her hairdo or the clothes she was wearing. It had a greater meaning than that. Back to Judges 16, though, verse 26. And Samson said unto the lad that held him by the hand. So here's Samson in this great temple, and he's fettered, and they're doing all of this stuff to his God, and they're doing all these things to abuse him. And he said to the lad, Suffer me, allow me that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house standeth, that I may lean upon them. I'm so weak now after all this. Can you just help me over to the pillars so I can lean on them? Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistine were there. And there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld while Samson made sport. About 3,000 men and women watching all this. And Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember thee, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars upon which the house stood, and on which it was borne up, of the one on the right hand and the other with his left. So here he is. He's got his hands on these 2 pillars. This temple, they have discovered in archaeological finds temples like this, and they're unique in design in that the entire weight of that great roof, and these are huge temples, but the entire support from them is dependent upon 2 central pillars. And that's where Samson is with these, and he's got his hands on those 2 pillars. And Samson said, verse 30, Let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. So that the dead which he slew at his death were more than they which he slew in his life. Then his brethren, all the house of his father, came down and took him, and brought him up, and buried him between Zoreth and Eshtaol, in the burying place of Manoah his father. And he had judged Israel 20 years. It is a tragic end to Samson's life. And yet out of that tragedy, out of that great defeat, comes a great victory. A victory so great that it's greater than all the victories that he had accomplished during his life. You know, you want to talk about a comeback, you know. There's no heavyweight boxer, not even Rocky Balboa, that had that kind of comeback. What he did in that moment of his defeat, at that tragic time of his downfall, still brought about such great victory. And he did it once again by believing God to energize that spirit within him, that Samson accomplished what God had sent him to do. He was a huge beginning of delivering them from the Philistines, which will be finished under the kingship of David. God bless.